49ers update from the waterfront with the ferry building chiming behind us. Beautiful Bay Bridge look as we talk about the defensive coordinator search. Everybody seems focused on Gus Bradley, but I think that's just the backup plan for the 49ers. And it'd be a fine backup plan. It'd give them continuity after Robert Saleh reestablished a good defensive flow in 2025. But if Kyle Shanahan had his choice, I believe that Raheem Morris would be the defensive coordinator in 2026. Good friends with Raheem. We can talk a little bit more about that later, but you think about a coach who's had success with multiple fronts, with different defensive schemes on offense and on defense. Kyle Shanahan thinks that's a really big deal with Raheem Morris. I think that is the type of coach that Kyle Shanahan wants as his defensive coordinator, because Kyle himself has both offensive and defensive coaching experience in his background. He believes that's how you can attack an opposing offense if you're a defensive coordinator, if you can actually understand what that offensive coordinator is thinking. Raheem has run a 4-down front back in Tampa. It's not just 3-4 with Raheem Morris like he was with the Rams under Sean McVay. So there's a reason why he's the biggest possible fish for the 49ers in this defensive coordinator search. He's been a head coach twice, and he probably, if he can't get a head coaching job in this cycle, he probably will be very popular on the defensive coordinator circuit, and I think that maybe Kyle Shanahan would want him more than anyone else. It could be a very, very good pairing for the 49ers. And when Raheem Morris was first fired as a head coach from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, first call he got was from Kyle Shanahan, who was with Washington at the time. Mike Shanahan was the head coach. Kyle was the offensive coordinator, and Raheem Morris went to Washington to be the DB coach. Kyle and Raheem go back a long way. 2005, they were both with Tampa. They were much lower on the coach pecking order back then. There's a walk through the ferry building in downtown San Francisco. Welcome into the studio. We're going to talk about Raheem Morris potentially to the 49ers. Now, the holdup, obviously, is that he is a head coaching candidate. The Arizona Cardinals interested in Raheem, but there's a good chance, I think, that Arizona ends up going with Anthony Campanile, who is the Jacksonville Jaguars defensive coordinator. And if that ends up happening and Raheem doesn't have a job, then all of a sudden he's going to become probably the hottest defensive coordinator prospect on the entire market. And he's got connections with the Packers, with LaFleur and that staff. He's got connections with the Rams. Raheem Morris was the Rams defensive coordinator under Sean McVay from 2021 to 2023. 21 was obviously a Super Bowl winning year. There are a lot of teams, I think, that would be interested in Raheem's services. However, the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan might be at the very, very top of that list. We have a little illustration here for you of the 49ers coaching search, just to very concisely show what the deal here is. They've got Shanahan, and now he's looking for a defensive coordinator with Robert Saleh gone. The internal favorite is Gus Bradley. But external options, talk about Raheem Morris, talk about Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz is still under contract with the Cleveland Browns, and he's interviewing for that head coaching position. I guess a really, really intensive interview process happening in Cleveland for that head coaching position. They're reportedly a data-driven operation and are requiring head coaching candidates to complete questionnaires, a multi-part essay, a personality test, and additional homework. That is from Tom Pelissero. Mike McDaniel, the former Shanahan lieutenant, and Jesse Minter, who's just hired for a head coaching job, both withdrew their name from consideration for the Cleveland Browns. But Jim Schwartz is still under contract there. They could theoretically force Jim to be their head coach since he is under contract for defensive coordinator there in Cleveland. And if he becomes free, well, then all of a sudden that might change the calculus here. But the way that I read in between the lines is that Gus Bradley was brought in to be the high floor backup plan for the 49ers. And it wouldn't be a bad thing at all to have Gus and his experience, especially continuity coming off of Robert Saleh. He is the former mentor of Robert Saleh. That could be the candidate the 49ers get if Raheem Morris does not become available and if they cannot land Raheem Morris. But Shanahan and Raheem Morris, I mean, there's a history. These two guys got arrested together. You could read about it. There are articles about it. It's on the public record as very young coaches when Shanahan was 23, and it wasn't a very just situation. They didn't do anything wrong, but it happened in Indianapolis in 2023. Shanahan has always had Morris's back. Mike Silver wrote about that whole incident in his book, the Why is Everything. It's about that entire Shanahan coaching tree, which obviously does include Raheem Morris. And it's fascinating to see how far the history goes back between these two guys. And the fact that Kyle was the first to call Raheem Morris after he was fired from Tampa Bay in his first head coaching stint, and Morris went straight to Washington, where both of the Shanahans were at the time, I absolutely think that is a significant piece of information in this whole saga, as is the coaching background of Raheem Morris. And this is something that goes back to Bill Walsh. Raheem Morris is coached on both sides of the football. So with Tampa Bay, Raheem Morris was defensive quality control coach in 2002, moved up to defensive assistant in 2003, and then was the assistant DB coach in 2004 and 2005. So was rooted on the defensive side of the ball. Then he became the DC for Kansas State for a year, then came back to Tampa Bay to become the head coach from 2007 to 2011. Was fired, and Shanahan called him, so he went to Washington to be the DB coach under Mike Shanahan, working again on the same staff as Kyle Shanahan. Then he went to Atlanta in 2015. Remember that Kyle Shanahan also went to Atlanta in 2015. And with Atlanta in 15, he was the defensive pass game coordinator. But listen to this. In 2016, Kyle Shanahan, second year's offensive coordinator in Atlanta. They had Matt Ryan, the league MVP. They had a super high-charged offense. That was the offense that ended up getting Kyle Shanahan his job as the head coach of the 49ers. Raheem Morris moved to wide receivers coach. So he had worked on the defensive side of the ball his entire career, but he moved to the receivers coach under Shanahan for one of the best offenses. I say one of the best offenses because the 2023 offense was for the 49ers was really good. But that 2016 Falcons offense had Shanahan at OC and Raheem Morris as the wide receivers coach. And he was also designated as the assistant head coach. You could have one of those on your staff in 2016. That prevents poachings from happening if you designate that guy as an assistant head coach. After Shanahan's departure to the 49ers, Raheem Morris was promoted to the offensive pass game coordinator. That was in 2017 and 2018. In 2019, he was, again, the wide receivers coach, and he started coaching some of the defensive backs again in 2019 because then he was transitioned back to the defensive coordinator role. So Raheem Morris coached on both sides of the ball in Atlanta. Started off on the defensive side, moved to become one of Kyle Shanahan's main lieutenants on the offensive side, transitioned back to defensive coordinator, was hired by the Rams as their DC in 21, was that Rams defensive coordinator as they won the Super Bowl, went back to the Falcons as their head coach, was recently let go by the Falcons, and now he is seeing if he can get a third head coaching opportunity. But if he doesn't, Kyle Shanahan absolutely loves the multi-dimensional coaching background of Raheem Morris because Kyle himself started as a defensive quality control guy in Tampa, and that's where he cut his teeth, and that's where he befriended Raheem Morris. They were both on the defensive side of the ball over there. So it's super fascinating to learn how Kyle Shanahan views the game, who he respects as a coach, what kind of thought process he really, really covets as a coach. And coaches who have worked with both sides of the football for Kyle, that's so important because he understands that his time as a defensive quality control guy in Tampa Bay allowed him to learn how defenders and defensive coaches think, and that's how he can attack as an offensive coach. Well, the other way around works great. Kyle loves when a defensive coach has worked with an offensive background because he knows that offensive background allows the defensive coach to know how an offense might attack him. A couple other really interesting pieces of information. The 49ers, I talked about this last night, but they requested an interview with Falcons secondary coach Justin Hood, but they were blocked because it was for a lateral move. Okay, so let's unpack this. Last night, I said, well, maybe Daniel Bullocks or another 49ers assistant will be poached by Robert Saleh and taken to Tennessee. Could be Daniel Bullocks or it could be Ray Brown, who's the just a specific cornerbacks coach for the 49ers. Bullocks coaches all DBs. He's been with the team for 9 years. So if Saleh could try to take Bullocks with him as his defensive coordinator in Tennessee, or Ray Brown, who was hired only after Robert Saleh was hired to the 49ers this past year, Saleh could be trying to take Ray Brown to coach his DBs for the Tennessee Titans. Either way, the 49ers would have to have a fill-in for one of those positions, which is maybe why they requested to interview Justin Hood for probably a DB coach role. Definitely not a coordinator role because they wouldn't have been blocked if he had been offered an interview for the coordinator role. That is one way to look at it. That's 1A, and you could also look at it through 1B. Justin Hood was the Falcons' secondary coach under Raheem Morris. So this is a Morris staffer, and if the 49ers are trying to woo Raheem Morris to their team, well, maybe you can get some of his staff members over there. They were blocked by the Falcons, who have decided to keep Justin Hood under contract if he's not going to get a promotion elsewhere, as is Atlanta's right. But it still is an interesting tea leaf as we examine what the 49ers' intentions here might be. They want to get that sorted, I think, over the course of the next week or so. Jeremy Fowler on the 49ers defensive coordinator situation. Tennessee might also have interest in Bradley, and he can't be blocked from leaving because he's not currently a coordinator. Although I think that a designated assistant head coach role, as I just said, is something that the team can partially block. I'll have to check on those rules, but you can only have one per team, and the 49ers have Gus Bradley as assistant head coach. But Bradley staying in San Francisco seems like a sensible move at this point. Raheem Morris is also an attractive option there. Jeremy Fowler, just put that out there. He is saying the same thing as me, and this is what the graphic that we created says as well. Raheem Morris, Jim Schwartz, outside options for the 49ers. The obvious internal one is Gus Bradley. I think either way, if you're the 49ers, you want some sort of continuity established here. In the case of Raheem Morris, somebody who's already been a head coach twice, perhaps he's not going to have another chance at a head coaching job for at least a few more years. Maybe that's somebody that you can get aboard to give this defense at least 2, maybe 3 years. I mean, DeMeco Ryans was able to give him 2. That was really big in 2021, 2022. By the time DeMeco left, it was the best defense in football. They're about to have 4 defensive coordinators in 4 years. I mean, it was DeMeco in 2022. It was Steve Wilkes in 2023. It was Nick Sorensen in 2024. And it was Robert Saleh in 2025. So they have had 4 in 4 years. They're about to have 5 in 5 years. And the last time that they had a multi-year defensive coordinator was when they had DeMeco Ryans for 21 and 2022. Prior to that, Robert Saleh built this thing up for the 49ers over 4 seasons. And you don't typically want your guys sticking around for too long because that means they're not getting those promotion opportunities. But something like what Andy Reid has found in Kansas City, in Steve Spagnuolo, somebody who's already withdrawn from true head coaching interest, doesn't probably even really want to interview as head coach, hadn't worked out for him as a head coach, but has decided to become a lifetime defensive coordinator, and he's a good one at that. That's been a good setup for the Kansas City Chiefs. Raheem Morris is not long in the tooth. This is still a younger coach who I'm sure still has ambitions to become a head coach down the line. That's why he's in consideration for the Arizona Cardinals head coaching job as we speak. But he has already had 2 of those head coaching jobs. And it might be a little too soon to count on him to go ahead and straight away get another, especially with Campanile being the potential favorite over there in Arizona. So if Morris is not hired as a head coach, I think that the 49ers are a very, very logical landing spot given how far back Shanahan and Raheem Morris go. Now, Morris is interesting because he ran a 3-down odd man front with the Rams from 2021 to 23. And that's the last time that we saw him as a defensive coordinator by title. He was obviously a Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator in 2021. Yes, he had Aaron Donald on his team. But what I'm more interested in is the fact that he's worked with multiple fronts over the course of his career. And you go back to the Tampa days when he was the head coach there, and Tampa was running a 4-man front. And I think the 49ers are going to be running a 4-man front for the foreseeable future. They feel that their personnel is tailored around that. They think that Gus Bradley is a good fallback option for them, since he has coached a 4-man front dating back to the Seattle days. There's a big misconception in the media that the 49ers still run the Seattle system, that they have to get somebody that is from the Seattle system. I think that is the grossest oversimplification, and it really just ignores history. The 49ers have not run the Seattle system per se since 2019. Like in 2019, or since 2018, because in 2019, they brought in Joe Woods from outside the Seattle tree. They changed their coverages. They started running a lot more cover 4 instead of cover 3. The diversification on the back end really, really set things up to be different for the 49ers. And now, I mean, Saleh went to New York and back, and this defense evolved a lot over the course of those few seasons. Now, when you look at the 49ers defense, the only thing that remains from what they ran up in Seattle when Robert Saleh and Gus Bradley and Dan Quinn and all those guys were up there, the only thing that remains is the 4-man front. Yeah, you got cover 3, but cover 3 is a defense that everybody runs to some extent. 49ers can run a whole lot more than cover 3. So this whole Seattle style, they're going to stay, they have to stay with Gus Bradley, that doesn't make much sense to me, because the 49ers, it's been like 6 years since the 49ers were a true Seattle-style defense. Mike just texted me. He's like, 49ers have not been in a traditional Carroll defense since what, the end of 2018? Yep, 2019. They brought Richard Sherman in 2018, and they ran the same exact scheme in 2018. And then they began to diversify in 2019. What happened was that they got much better personnel heading into 2019, because they drafted Nick Bosa and they signed D Ford, or they traded for D Ford and they signed him. So they had the bookending edges, obviously had Sherman in there for the second year. They finally had a pass rush, but they also realized, you know what? The league has figured out some of the ways to really, really, I think Richard Sherman had a quote for it, because Kyle Shanahan was always the play caller that gave the Legion of Boom a lot of trouble. He said that he's found a way to bastardize our coverages. So Sherman always had this great respect for Shanahan, because Shanahan figured out how to attack the Seattle-style cover 3. By the time the 2019 rolls around, I think that a lot of the league has figured out how to attack the Seattle-style cover 3. So the 49ers bring in Joe Woods to be their defensive backs coach, and he runs a lot of quarters man coverage on the back end. So the 49ers changed defensively at that point. And in 2020, they changed big time, because Saleh, who never really likes the blitz, had to blitz a lot because Bosa got hurt and D Ford got hurt and nobody was available in that 2020 season. So I think that you saw a massive evolution in this defense, even when Robert Saleh was first aboard in his initial stint in 2019 or in 2020. Then DeMeco Ryans took over with his own flavor in 2021. They dipped a bit in 21, but he made adjustments. You got to give him a lot of credit. And by 2022, they had the number 1 defense in all of football. And I think that's the highest level the 49ers had ever played defensively. Somebody said in the national media, and this is probably why you shouldn't listen to the national media, but the talk was 49ers are screwed. This is what happens when you lose the defensive coordinator of Saleh's caliber. 49ers will never bounce back from this. It's already happened before. To be honest, the last time Saleh left, the 49ers had the number 1 defense in the league within 2 years, with DeMeco Ryans being the coordinator. And it wasn't until DeMeco Ryans left after the 2022 season where the 49ers have seen a defensive dip. So that was when they moved to Steve Wilkes in 23. And, a lot of people saying hire outside the building, hire outside the system, diversify the system. That's what they wanted to do in 2023 with Steve Wilkes, and that failed absolutely miserably, as we know. They dipped down to the number 26 run defense in football. He wasn't able to get them to play with the same type of fire that they played with in years prior with Robert Saleh and with D'Amico Ryan. So they fired Wilkes after a year. They went in-house the next season with no better options, at least so they felt, and Nick Sorensen fell flat on his face. So they got rid of Sorensen, and they were able to get Saleh back after he was fired by the New York Jets. And I think that the 49ers successfully stabilized the defense this year, but because of all the injuries, it was by no means a world-beating unit. They got to find the defensive ranks from year to year for the 49ers. That is all going to be up on probably my X page, so I have to head over there. I've had this really nicely illustrated, though, at this spot. So here you can see the year over year. For San Francisco, 2025 was only a nominal improvement in overall efficiency over 2024. But the run defense was significantly better, and it was significantly better despite the fact that the 49ers lost Bosa, Warner, and Michael Williams. I think that's really, really an important detail to include, because Michael was an absolute godsend for this team. When they had Michael Williams in 2025, they were the number 6 run defense in all football. When they didn't have Michael Williams in 2025, they were the number 22 run defense in all of football. So it was more about the players than the scheme for the 49ers. And when you see this type of run defense improvement, and I know it finished at number 17, but I think the number 17 is a whole lot better than number 26 and number 29. When you saw the upward trajectory and you said, okay, they could be even better, and they will be even better once they return health, you say you want to stay in the same family of scheme if you're San Francisco. You don't want to blow things up and go in a whole different direction. And that is exactly why Gus Bradley is the fallback plan. I think that with better talent, he could take this up to a top 10 run defense. And better talent means less injuries. And I think that if you're then really trying to push the box, push the envelope, Raheem Morris, who's worked with Shanahan, who's worked with on both sides of the ball, is a prime candidate for San Francisco. But as you can see here, that drop-off truly began after the 2022 season, from number 2 to number 23 in run defense. And the pass defense stayed good in 2023, but it wasn't as good as 2022. And the 49ers total rank fell to number 10, and then they've fallen to 26 and 24 over the past 2 seasons. I need to go get some water. I am absolutely parched right now. So I'm going to let people continue to stay aboard here. What I'm going to do is find my article. This is probably going to take me 5 seconds. Actually, I'm going to see if we can get a little water delivery to the room, so that way I could stay online. This is Lombardi herself. We're going to text her. Maybe she doesn't have any water, though. Yes, please. She's going to look for some water. Great. Awesome. And I can look for some questions here while I put up my article from the San Francisco Standard. I haven't promoted this on the channel yet because I don't think we've done a live by the computer yet. But here you go. What will change and what will stay the same about the 49ers in 2026? They're not going to change defensive. Oh, nice. It's fancy water. Thank you.
It's not cold.
Do you want to say anything?
No, I just wish Robert Saleh would have stayed with the Niners and not gone to the Titans.
Well, he's in Nashville now, stuck in the snow.
Bro's going to be stuck in the snow for a lot longer.
Did you guys see the weather around the country? It's wild this week. We're flying somewhere and we decided to completely avoid it. So thank you. Love you too. I needed the water. This is fancy water. She only drinks this kind of stuff now. Fiji water. So I've heard that Fiji is just like Tahiti, except half the price. It's one of my friends said last night. We went to Tahiti last year, and yeah, Tahiti's like Hawaii prices. Fiji, 50% off. 2 hours further. This water is not half the price, though. I know this water is like a little bit more pricey, but I need it this bad. So anyway, check out the article. We're going to link it. And I'm going to give it to Mike right now. I'm hopping in, answering some questions. Here you go, Mike. Ooh, Mike has the good 49ers defense chart. I love this one. Mike is putting the link to the article in the description. Go check it out. Support me. Sign up for the San Francisco Standard. We're going to have the best off-season coverage that there is of the 49ers. You know, I was just watching a highlight reel. I watched like the first 3 or 4 minutes of the season. It's like a 45-minute highlight reel on YouTube. And boy, I was only through 5 games. I watched weeks 1 through 5 of just playing highlights. It got up to the Rams game down at SoFi. There was a lot of good football, and I'm only through a quarter of the season. There was a Luke Farrell touchdown that I'd forgotten about in week 2 at New Orleans to open the season, where he sidestepped the linebacker and took it into the end zone. That was his, I believe, only touchdown catch and his first of his career, so only one of his career. By the way, here's the defensive coordinator chart. This is where the 49ers have been on a year-in, year-out basis. Bottom is run defense. Y-axis is pass defense, so you want to be further to the right and further up. We got to get the 2026 defense or 25 defense. Oh, 2025 is on here. RSF 49ers has come through. So the 49ers defensively this year were a bottom right unit, but again, it's really, really hard to fairly judge and evaluate the unit when they had as many injuries as they did. But just for context, to see where they fit within the larger structure of this team's needs, the defense was in the same ballpark as 2017 and 2018. And those were 2 losing 49ers teams. So the 49ers were to finish 13-6 this year with a defense that was in the same ballpark as the 6-10 2017 team and the 4-12 2018 team. That's a massive credit to the 49ers offense and to the special teams for San Francisco. Now, I think the fact that they lost as many as they did defensively, the fact they were able to keep this afloat, because they were never down to a 4th-string middle linebacker in 2017. The fact that the 49ers were able to also keep this afloat at 2017 levels defensively is a credit to Robert Saleh. But moving forward, if they want to be legitimate Super Bowl contenders, favorites even in 2026, they've got to get this up into the upper right. I don't think you've got to be 2019 or 2022, the great Saleh and the great Ryan's defenses, but I think that if you can get this up above 2020 level, if you can get, again, in the upper right quadrant, if you're the 49ers as a defense, you will be in business because your offense was good enough to overcome being down here in 2025. Anyway, I'm watching this highlight reel of the 49ers, and there was so many good plays. And this is just the highlights. I like watching tape to where I could see the good plays behind the scenes, and we talk about those a lot on the show. But just the sheer amount of highlights over the first few weeks. Eddie Pinheiro booted that field goal through against the Arizona Cardinals and started taunting their bench. And he's like, we're like, why? Why'd you do that, Eddie? He says, because they're an NFC rival. That's a division rival. I've got to talk some crap to him. That was Pinheiro's big introductory moment. That was his first game at Levi Stadium. That was the 49ers home opener. They started at Seattle, where they won, by the way. I think everybody remembers Jake Tonjes. There was a great rail route that they ran to Kyle Juszczyk in that game against Seattle as well. They had more weapons. I mean, when the 49ers lost to Seattle in the playoffs, they simply ran out of ammo. It's not that much deeper than that. It's not any deeper than that. They had a little bit of ammo still in the tank in week 1 in that season opener against Seattle. And it was cool to watch some of those plays. They would have beaten Seattle by multiple scores on the road had Eddie Pinheiro been the kicker instead of Jake Moody in week 1. Then there was Mac Jones, the Juwan Jennings touchdown on the crosser in the fourth quarter to help put the Saints away. They got the Seahawks and the Saints in back-to-back weeks on closer plays, one from Nick Bosa, one from Bryce Huff. As John Lynch said, and I have this up in the article on the San Francisco Standard, this article that I'm getting you guys to try to read, Bosa's a force multiplier. The 49ers were obviously missing him. They're obviously missing Fred Warner. Lynch even started to categorize Michael Williams into that force multiplier level. And I think when you've got splits like this one, you could argue that Michael Williams has force multiplier characteristics. I mean, their run defense, this is outside of Bosa and Warner. Bosa and Warner were hurt before Michael Williams was, so that they counted to the run defense with Michael Williams. So he was holding down a good run defense at number 6. The fact that it dropped down to number 22 after that, I think that's a big, big indication that the double teams that Michael Williams was absorbing, the edges that he was setting for the 49ers were very, very productive to allow the linebackers to flow behind him. All right, now seriously, comment section. You guys have good questions. Let's go. This is ridiculous. There's never an excuse to let the Seahawks put 41 points as well as the Rams. Bro, when you're down to 4th and 5th string players, decent NFL offenses will score points. Also, it's not all on the defense. You realize that when the offense turns the ball over, the defense is going to have to defend the offense, the opposing offense, more often. And if that defense is already hurt, then it's going to be much more trouble. Also, special teams impacts the score. So the Seahawks, that was a touchdown that didn't even involve the 49ers defense to open the game when Rashid Shaheed took back the kick. So technically only 34 points were scored against the 49ers defense in Seattle, but a lot of that is also on the offense, which didn't have separation. I mean, you either have ammo or you don't. Not everything is an indictment of a coaching staff or of a single player. Sometimes you have the goods to win some of these games, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes the opposition is too good, and the 49ers won way, way more than anyone could have predicted, given how shorthanded they were this year. But saying they need to let somebody go just because there was a bad game here or a bad game there without taking any into the discussion is absolutely foolish. You cannot look at it like that. I'm looking for some more questions. Scrolling down to the bottom. This is a good one right here. Can the 49ers return to the 2019 run game? Well, they're going to need a lot of speed for that. I mean, Brian Robinson, really good back, but they had like between Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman in 2019, those guys were running borderline 4.2s. I mean, their football speed, I thought, was a 4.2. With the way that they were able to hit that edge, the 49ers had absurd speed in 2019 that they haven't had since. Maybe some of those Miami teams under Mike McDaniel had that kind of speed. Obviously, the Dolphins did bring in Raheem Mostert as well, but you're going to need more speed if you're going to want to run a 2019-like offense. I also think that caught the league off guard with that speed plus the outside zone. I mean, they pushed that edge hard in 2019. I think that the league is downsized on defense to get faster to be able to defend those kind of offenses. So I don't know if the 49ers are going to be able to get prime 2019 run game, but I do think that they have a better pass game than they did then. I think their pass game now, I think Purdy is this version of Brock Purdy is A, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, right? That's established. But B, is the highest level of quarterback Kyle Shanahan has had in his tenure. And ultimately, any run game can be adjusted to, right, as a defense. But a good quarterback who can threaten to run and also pass, that's something that's really, really hard to adjust to as an opposing defense. So 49ers run game, they're going to try to get it as good as possible, but 2019 levels are probably unrealistic. But that's okay because they can raise this offense to entirely new levels thanks to the strength of the quarterback play. Tonjes is not an unrestricted free agent, so he's not eligible for a reserve future contract. They're going to be restricted free agents and exclusive rights free agents. Tonjes is, I believe, a restricted free agent, so they're probably going to have to go through the tender process with Jake Tonjes. But no, he is not officially gone. He'll likely be on the 49ers next year. They might subvert the RFA process to just find a deal with Jake Tonjes. But if they don't subvert the process, then they'll tender Tonjes, and he'll either accept the tender, sign it, or not. And there is a chance that another team can go and offer Tonjes more, in which case the 49ers would have the right of first refusal. I don't know if it will get that far, but I think that he'll likely stay with the 49ers, as is the case with most restricted free agents. It's a good way for them to test their market, but they are not going to be unbridled, unrestricted free agents. You know, we're talking about the 49ers coaching staff and Raheem Morris potentially coming over as San Francisco's defensive coordinator if he doesn't land a head coaching job. Let's hear Kyle Shanahan talking about Gus Bradley a little bit earlier this season.
A stud. Never got a chance to work with him until this year, and I mean, he's probably like the most upbeat guy in our staff. We love having him around. He's a great guy to hang out with Saleh a ton. Saleh, I would say Gus mentored Saleh early in his career, especially at Jacksonville and stuff, and then they've been separate for a while. So now for them to get back together after they started together, they see it a lot different, but they're always from the same foundation. And to have someone like that to bounce ideas off of, and where he went to and where Saleh's gone to, I think is really cool for Saleh to have, and just for our building to have. Like, Gus is talking to everybody. It's not just the defense. You see random people in his room all the time. He cares a lot about people. He's a really easy guy to talk to, and he kind of has that relationship with really everybody in our building, and he's done it real fast.
Gus is a really, really high quality guy. Like, he makes everybody feel special. He's very charismatic, just a good dude to have around the building. He's obviously had success coaching the defensive side of the ball at many stops over the course of his career. He obviously was the original architect, along with Pete Carroll, of that Legion of Boom defense. And then he moved on to become head coach of Jacksonville. He ran the red zone for the 49ers, or he schemed the red zone for San Francisco this past year. And the red zone is where they performed disproportionately well compared to the rest of the unit. This is as solid of a fallback plan as there can be. The 49ers will run the whole process and see if they could land a bigger swing like Raheem Morris. But I don't think that they would be in major trouble if Gus Bradley was their defensive coordinator. It's downright silly to compare him, who has a ton of experience, decades worth of experience, to Nick Sorensen, who was brand new to defensive play calling. A lot of people trying to draw that parallel, saying, the 49ers would just get lazy with an in-house hire. It is not the same thing. And I think that the 49ers are the opposite of lazy, because they went out and they made a contingency plan just in case they lost Robert Saleh by bringing in Gus Bradley. Now we find out how the contingency plan is enacted. And they, it's one of those things where continuity at some point needs to be established on the defensive side of the ball, because you have seen the lack of continuity lead to results that are not exactly desirable. Now, I know that it's not just the lack of continuity that has caused the problem here. I think that the 49ers are also in a spot where injuries have hurt them bad over the course of the past 2 seasons. But the downward trend of the defense has not been good, and you need to get more blue. You need to return to some blue. Last time they've had blue on this chart, which denotes above average performance, these are all ranks, was 2023. And even then, things were slipping. Anyway, any more questions? Let's go back to here. This is funny, and I think that this is probably true. You think Saleh took the Titans job just so he can face Cohn twice a year? And there was that big yelling match after the 49ers played Jacksonville and Liam Cohn. And I think that could have something to do with Saleh heading into that AFC South. Both D'Amico Ryans and Saleh now in that division. Here's a question. On another note, should NFL teams should the NFL prevent teams doing their hiring process until the Super Bowl? Seems like a distraction for coaches and teams. I've always thought that. I guess that they want to give teams a shot to fill the roles sooner rather than later. But what benefit is there in the NFL to that? It's not like there's a recruiting window, like a transfer portal, like there is in college, where you need that coach to be in there more quickly. Free agency doesn't open until March. So I tend to agree with you. Why not push this back until after the Super Bowl? And I have yet to hear a good reason as to why not. So many people asking about the electrical substation. Everybody is asking, but I don't really know what information you could possibly want me to give. I heard that it made its way onto Joe Rogan today. So now Joe Rogan is talking about the electrical substation near the 49ers facility. And we do have some sad news here. Mike, can you confirm that this is real, given the fact that there has been some fake news? Not about this guy, but I don't want to put this up on the screen. But Mike, can you confirm that what you sent me is real? He said it's via the 49ers. So, yeah, so a 49ers franchise grade and also Stanford franchise grade, John Brodie, has passed away. Born in 1935, passed away. This just announced by the 49ers. There's Brodie being carried off the field, it looks like, by some fans at Candlestick after a big win for San Francisco. So rest in peace, John Brodie. The jersey number 12 for the 49ers is retired. That's what John Brodie wore. He was the quarterback of Stanford before he went to the 49ers. Really opened up that pipeline, right? A pipeline that later brought Bill Walsh to San Francisco. And of course, Jim Harbaugh was the coach at Stanford before he came to the 49ers. But Brodie, great 49ers QB. This was before the era of Montana, before the era of Steve Young. And now, of course, Brock Purdy in there for the 49ers. John Brodie wore that number 12, and he wore it well. Our condolences, our prayers out to his family. Mike just confirmed that. Thank you, Mike. The reason that and the 49ers just sent me an email as well. 49ers star quarterback John Brodie passed away today at the age of 90. I'm going to put his picture back up on the screen here as I read some of the statements from the 49ers. John York said the 49ers family is saddened to learn of the passing of one of the franchise's all-time great players, John Brodie. As a kid, my 49ers fandom began by watching John play quarterback on television. He displayed an incredible commitment towards his teammates, and his support of the organization never wavered after his playing days. John became a dear friend of mine, and he will always be remembered as an important part of 49ers history. We express our deepest condolences to his wife, Sue, and the entire Brodie family. Brodie was drafted 3rd overall by the 49ers in 1957. Spent all 17 of his seasons with the 49ers, 201 games, 31,548 yards. Is a lot of yards for that era. 214 touchdowns. His 17 seasons marked the longest tenure of any 49ers player. Second most in franchise history when it comes to passing yards, behind only Montana. And then those back-to-back NFC championship games. I know that those are marred with heartbreak for the 49ers, but in 1970 and 71, they went to those two NFC championship games straight. His jersey number was retired shortly thereafter in 1973, right after Brodie retired from the 49ers. He's a San Francisco native. Born in San Francisco on August 14th, 1935. Went to Stanford, played golf at Stanford as well. Unanimous All-American and inducted into the Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame in 1988, and obviously is in the 49ers Hall of Fame as well. I should know where John Brodie went to high school. He was born in the city. He was born in San Francisco. Born in Menlo Park, grew up in San Francisco, high school at Oakland Tech. So high school across the bay in Oakland. Got a great picture here of John Brodie preparing to pass the football. So rest in peace to John Brodie. He's passed away at the age of 90. And with that, we're going to end our show. So everybody, enjoy the rest of your Friday, and we'll certainly be talking to you a lot here over the course of this weekend. Take care.